This week, it's more Morbius. Hey, at least we don't have to talk about Jared Leto anymore, though. This is the Superhero Pantheon. Now on this podcast, we will take 3 episodes of the Fox Kids version of Spider-Man that aired in the mid-90s and discuss/review. This is not for Pantheon eligibility, but is a fun extended side project. My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Twitter at JeromeC1985. You can find additional episodes of this podcast through Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and all of your favorite podcast apps through the real world. We strongly encourage you to leave a 4 or 5-star review so as to help people discover this show and the great work that the folks at the real world are doing. If you would like to interact with us or send feedback, you can do so by following us on Twitter at Hero Pantheon. My co-host for this week and every week will be Brian DeBrain. He can be found on Twitter at Brian DeBrain. Brian, this week we are exploring episodes 10, 11, and 12 of the second season, the Neogenic Nightmare. We have one more episode with Morbius and Blade, plus the most inexplicable romance perhaps ever. And then we are going to talk about the Tablet of Time, which, let me tell you, I don't have any hot takes on it, but it sure is a thing that happened. But first, let's get to talking about the Immortal Vampire. Brian, any initial thoughts on the Immortal Vampire, the episode 10?
You know what? I kind of wish this was the last episode of the season, because it feels like it ends on a high note, but then the Tablet of Time shit kind of comes in after and kind of is like, oh yeah, we still got to cure Spider-Man. He's not exactly cured yet. So that's kind of where my feelings are, because like it felt like it ended the way it should have ended. Like, spoiler alert, he turns into a man-bat and flies away into a cave, but he's never seen again or whatever, I guess. But that feels like a proper ending to this whole arc that started 6-7 episodes ago when he turned into Morbius. So it's just kind of unfortunate the way that they kind of aired it. Like, I maybe would have waited. I probably would have put the Tablet of Time stuff in the next season, but maybe that's just me, or maybe they had the order of like 14 episodes and they had to put it in that order. I don't know, because it feels like this was like the actual season finale. You know what I mean? It felt like it. But as I mentioned before, like on the Morbius review, how I feel they should have went with the Hammer horror style, the old 50s, 60s Hammer horror movies. If you look at the movie marquee in this episode at the beginning, it says Horror of Dracula, which was the first Hammer horror movie in the series with Christopher Lee. So same way, like, I don't know, but I guess the 90s people are more in tune to what Morbius should be than the current people who made the Morbius movie. Unbelievable.
To be fair, I'm still not a fan of the Morbius character, even in this show. But the one thing I will say is that it is so clear to me, this episode specifically, it makes it clear how big a horror fan these writers are. Like, I think we talked about this a little bit in the first season, but the second season, over and over again, there's just so much horror imagery. And I think even the ending of this episode with Morbius kind of turning in, I wrote in the notes that he turned into Man-Bat, which is a reference to the first episode of Batman the Animated Series, and the fact that he flies away and basically has to separate himself from Felicia. Like, there's so much like tragic horror going on in this episode that I couldn't help but think, like, there are some big time horror fans. There's also a direct reference to Anne Rice, which Anne Rice is a big deal, would have been a very big deal at this point because of Interview with a Vampire. So I get it, like, but still, like, the fact that they are making these horror references, the fact that the movie on the marquee, kind of the tragic elements, though I will give the show a lot of credit for having a clear point of view And these folks being clear fans of a genre that is not just other superhero movies or other Star Wars movies. Like, they have a perspective on horror, and they are bringing that into the show, and that is making for an interesting show. Even if it isn't always successful, they are clearly going for something, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, like we'll talk about this in a second, but the Tablet of Time, they're clearly going for like Indiana Jones type feel, and they're kind of switching it up from the horror feel. So I get that. Like, they know their genre for each episode and they stick with it, which is good because then you're not all over the place. Like, this feels like very much a horror arc for these last 7 episodes. So when you bring in Blade, yeah, it's definitely gonna be a horror arc. So yeah, and I was kind of like shocked too that they went with a romance angle with Blade, with Terry Lee, the police commissioner. So I was just kind of like,
Inexplicable. It literally came out of nowhere. I hate saying this, but it really feels like, oh, she's black, he's black, let's put them together. It literally came out of nowhere, made absolutely no sense. And here's what I'll say. I think there is a scenario where this could work, but the name of the show is Spider-Man. You are not going to have a plausible romance between two other characters that are not Spider-Man unless they are already married to each other, or you are willing to really put in the work and do a multiple episode arc with them as supporting characters, and they just were not going to do that. So the fact that this romance happens in the way it does is inexplicable to me.
well, I think this is my perspective of it, is like, I think because the character Terry Lee, we've seen her in the last couple episodes be like this really like hard ass and really like, she doesn't get along with a lot of people. And she's always trying to go after Spider-Man, despite Spider-Man always helping her. So I don't know if they did this to make her like a more humanized character and show her, like, to show that she really is like, does have a heart, and that she does care, and that she ends up caring for Blade, which is like the most like, he's not like a human, you know what I mean? He's like very unhuman, like he's the vampire, he's part human, part vampire. So I don't know if they just did that to make her more likable, because of in the previous episodes, especially the one with like the Punisher and the two hunters and stuff like that, it just made her seem like, oh, you're just in the way, and Spider-Man's a good guy, don't go after him. But I guess that's the point, right? And then they had that same kind of feel in this episode, but by the end they were all on the same page. So that kind of like, changes the dynamic of the show, where like there's going to be less heat on him from the cop's point of view now, because she's saw the good side of Spider-Man, basically. And that's kind of what they build up to in this episode. I guess that's kind of why they did it. But then again, it's like, we're never going to see Blade again, so why even tease the romance angle? So it was very weird, but I think they just wanted to make her more likable. So they made, just have her, like somebody. It's relatable. I guess that was the idea, but I just, I'd rather just have her be the hard ass and just be that really like strong female character, and not have her be like, distracted by Blade. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like they kind of needed to pick a direction with her and kind of stick with it, because it's definitely a flaw. I my other problem is the characterization of Blade is just really bad, and I am so glad that whatever Wesley Snipes did, it had nothing to do with this version of Blade, because Blade is just completely unhinged, and it just. Now, I have not read the comics, so I cannot speak to that. But in comparison to the movie, this version of Blade just seems completely unhinged. The Whistler, like, Chris Christopherson is very much his own kind of entity, but I can see the through line from this Whistler to the Whistler that is in the Blade trilogy. But in terms of the Blade character, boy, is it not good. And again, I do not like the voice performance that they selected. I just don't think that this really works out at all. And yeah, I think that, again, this episode to me is a mixed bag. I think there are some really good. The imagery is really good. I do like the tragic element of Morbius and Felicia's relationship, but is also tremendously amusing to me that we once again get Peter Parker as a bad boyfriend again as well.
He chose the sacrifice. He sacrificed his relationship in order to protect Mary Jane, apparently, because fucking he saw Morbius on the fucking roof or whatever, and he's like right behind Mary Jane, and Mary Jane just like won't shut up, and he's just like, God damn it. And then he says like, oh, I like Felicia. It was because of Felicia. Just go away. And then she's like, at least you told me the truth, Tiger, or something like that. So that sets up season 3. That definitely sets up season 3 with Harry Osborn. So they laid the groundwork there. But later on, like a few minutes later, fucking Aunt May steps out of the fucking house to see what's going on, and instead of literally listening to what Peter is saying, is that it goes like, "Go back in the house. You're safe in there. Go back in the house." She continues to go to the street and gets kidnapped by fucking Morbius, man. Fucking Aunt May. I swear to God, I swear to God, I was watching this in my kitchen and I yelled out, "Why don't you listen, Aunt May? God damn it!" And I just had this like kind of relatable moment to like my mom sometimes when I'm talking to her. She just like does the opposite of what I'm trying to tell her. But that's just parents.
So what you're saying is that the show is accurate to your experience. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, sometimes I'll tell my mom like, "Please do this" or don't do this," and she'll do the opposite and just kind of do it like, "Oh, sorry, Tiger." And that's exactly what Aunt May did.
That's a terrible impression of Aunt May or your mother. I can't decide who that was.
That was a weird amalgamation of both. But I'm just saying, Aunt May is continuing to get in the way, and I feel like she's just putting herself in the way at this point because she's literally stepping in the middle of a fucking war on the block instead of just staying in the fucking house. So that's my take on it.
So you're saying Peter Parker's sacrificing, like to me, he's trying to have it both ways, and that's actually worse because, in a way, he's kind of gaslighting Mary Jane. And again, we're watching the show through 2022 eyes, so it's going to be a little bit different. But that's how it comes across to me, like he's gaslighting her and not being truthful. And look, if he doesn't want to say what he's actually doing, like that is respectable. But you can't behave this way and expect to continue to be in a relationship either. So that's where I kind of come down.
Yeah, for sure. And then it's just like, well, that's the other thing too, is like he thinks that he deserves this relationship with Mary Jane, but in reality, it shouldn't like be a thing because there's no way. Like every fucking hour, he's doing something like very dangerous. Like there's no way he can have like a safe relationship. And I think he's got to. I don't think he comes to that realization ever in the show. But I think once the finale hits, he'll start to kind of change because of the finale. We'll get to that later on. But like the series finale, it seems like he's a different person and that he really loves Mary Jane.
So in the end, Blade turns Terry Lee down, gets a goodbye kiss out of it at least, drives away. And do we see Blade again in this series?
I'm trying to remember, but I don't think so. And I don't think Morbius comes back because it just seems like it's going to be all mainly Goblin focused in the next couple seasons.
Right. Yeah. I think that's also a huge part of it. Let's see what else. Let's get to episode 11, The Tablet of Time. You mentioned the Indiana Jones. I also think there are elements of the Mummy to this as well, even though there really isn't a mummy. I think you can make an argument that that's also a part of this, kind of also the idea of the Fountain of Youth, kind of that kind of trope. We get a bunch of randos finding the Tablet of Time. It is going to be investigated by Kirk Connors. A number of the villains, including Silvermane and Kingpin, want the tablet because of what it can do and all of its powers. So this is very much a mob-centric episode, as is episode 12. Brian, the thing that I want to point out, though, can we just talk about the water for a second? You know what I mean, right?
You CGI water that you don't like because they didn't 2D animate it?
Having been spoiled by Pixar, especially like watching a movie, like Finding Nemo is not my favorite movie of all time, but just the way the water looks, even Luca especially, like just gorgeous, and the water looks incredible. I understand that it is 1994. This is a kids' TV show, but can we just have done 2D water? I genuinely think that would have been better because this looks awful.
I don't know. It was definitely a choice, but maybe it was one of those things like, well, we're experimenting. We'll experiment. See how it comes out. If it comes out looking like shit, we just won't do it again. But they did it anyway because later on there's more CGI water in other episodes. So very, very experimental time in terms of animation for sure. But yeah, I just what I loved about these next two episodes, or these two episodes in particular with the Tablet of Time, is like the little moments we had between Vanessa and Kingpin. I thought that was really fascinating because like it's very similar to. Well, actually, no, it's very similar to the end of the Spider-Verse relationship that Vanessa and Kingpin have. Less so like the show where Vanessa gets more kind of involved. But I feel like they really started like getting into the good, juicy stuff. Because like a lot of kids are not going to pick up on that nuances and stuff like that between a couple like that. Where it's like, Kingpin, it has this, the Kingpin's having dinner with Vanessa. And then I love the fact that he says, "You seem so distant," and then they pan the fucking animation cells, and the table is super, super long. So there's just like this distance in between them, and you see that in a lot of movies between couples and stuff like that. But when he said it, and you see that the length of the table, it just adds this depth to it. So I was like, oh, no kids are going to pick up on this because I'm picking up on these little things right now, and the distance between they have in their actual relationship, and the fact that by the end of the second episode, Vanessa leaves him. So I was just like, oh shit, they really went there, and I didn't really like remember this as a kid. But she basically says like, you got to stop this. Like, this life of crime has to end. It's gonna end all of us if you don't end it now, kind of thing. And she leaves him at the end. So I was like, oh wow, this is some really good stuff. But then, you know, they go to the tablet of time and all the ridiculousness that goes with it. But I really love the Vanessa Kingpin stuff. And I thought it was a little weird too that they animated Vanessa's face and look to kind of look like Silvermane's daughter just to save money and cost in the animation. Did you notice that?
That was very strange. And if they had not provided a Silvermane, like a literal Silvermane to Vanessa, I think I would have gotten confused. It was very strange because you're right. The design was very similar. It looked like they were similar ages. I don't know whether that's the case or not, but it's there were just a lot of very weird choices across the board. So I want to shift from that to some absurdity. Brian, we found something out about Hammerhead that I think we need to talk about. Apparently his hair is made out of adamantium. And how does that happen? How is, like, if his follicles are adamantium, how was he able to survive, Brian?
See, I thought it was the top of his skull. Like a fucking what's that dinosaur?
If that's how you want to interpret it, okay, that's fair. But he said his hair, so I took that to mean like his.
See, I thought he said his head, and then he did the fucking dinosaur thing. I forgot what the name of the dinosaur is called, with that fucking incredible, callous, bulky rock head that kind of rams into shit. That's where I kind of, that's where I thought they were going with that. And then the adamantium part, I was like, oh shit, so does that mean he just killed that guy that he just hit? Because no way, running fucking like a bull with adamantium at the top of your head and ram a guy, there's no way that guy's not dead. You know what I mean? Like, that guy.
I guess for me, the big concern that I have with Hammerhead is that he's totally, utterly useless unless he's ramming his head into things, and he does that a lot in these 2 episodes, almost to the point of being a running gag. But Hammerhead is a big failure. Silvermane yells at him for being a failure. Silvermane wants the tablet because he's getting old and weak, and he would make himself young again to grind his enemies into dust. I really like that line. I think that was one of the better ones. I think the dynamic of Silvermane being so obsessed with this is kind of one of the things that works. Of course, we get introduced to a new lady in Peter Parker's life, and she's evil because, of course, it is Elisa. It is Silvermane's daughter working at the lab and serving as a spy to help her father get his hands on the tablet of time. Brian, I have a question for you. This is the most important one. So there's a point when Spider-Man goes to Dr. Connors' office and they are exploring the tablet of time. At one point, Dr. Connors is about to shoot the laser. Did you notice that it sounded exactly like a proton pack from the Ghostbusters?
No, I did not. But that would make sense because, when did the real Ghostbusters end? 1991 or something like that?
I mean, it is very possible that they were using the same sound effect suite, but I could not help. Like, it is... The thing about that noise from the movies and from the real Ghostbusters, it is such a distinctive noise that I immediately took that note and thought you would appreciate that. I thought you were going to bring that up to me, actually.
Wow, I guess it was just so fast that I just didn't pick up on it. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what they do. I mean, the Wilhelm scream is like still like in every fucking, not every production, but at least once a year, the Wilhelm scream will be in something animated or like sci-fi related with like a big fall from like a pratfall or something like that. So no surprise whatsoever.
So we get the return of Smythe as well. We also get the return of the Lizard, and Tombstone fights off Spider-Man a little bit, and the episode ends at the lab with Spider-Man returning Lizard back to being Connors, although he will return in the next episode. And Tombstone basically sends Spider-Man flying. Not the best of cliffhangers, I would say, mostly because the Tombstone character is fundamentally uninteresting to me. Now, if this was the Undertaker in the Spider-Man the Animated TV series, then I might be a little bit more interested, but alas, it is not. It is not even a pizza. It is not even the Kurt Russell movie. It's just a generic villain made out of concrete, it seems.
Yeah, because as a kid, like I used to confuse this, like, is he a vampire or whatever because of the teeth? And then when he shows up here, they don't even explain like why he's Tombstone, like, or why he's, made of concrete or whatever, and has fucking fangs for teeth or whatever. So you kind of just have to go with it, and you kind of go with it. It's fine, you know what I mean? He's a suitable henchman for the role. Yeah, I think this whole tablet of time thing, it's just like fucking, I don't know. I guess the implication is that it's radioactive, I think, and that's why it can supposedly turn people, younger, right? So it's just fucking weird. And the fact that they built that whole temple in the top of that building, I thought was hilarious. Because, like, I don't think logistically that even works, but they did it somehow. But hey, man, more power to them. Yeah, and then Connor's coming back, like I talked about, like we talked about before, like full circle, and like characters coming back and not just being one-offs. And Connor's just a really important character for the show because he's like the mentor doctor figure for Spider-Man. And here he's again struggling with the whole lizard thing, so that comes into play. So it just gets really chaotic with all this shit going on by the part 2 of it all. And yeah, this was not a great to be continued whatsoever, but yeah, I thought it was fun setup because like I got to see, Vanessa and Kingpin and all those little things, and I do love the idea of Silverman being obsessed with like becoming young again to defeat his enemies, and that's something that you can actually like kind of get your teeth into and invest in like a real story. Like if you wanted to branch out and create its own story, you don't have to use the licensing or whatever, but this idea of like a guy who's a gangster who's obsessed with becoming young again in order to defeat his enemies, I think that's a good story to tell in a serious kind of manner. So that's why this Silvermane thing really kind of gets at me, because I just feel like you can really expand this into something really interesting, maybe like a Ridley Scott type.
So for me, episode 12, it's very convoluted. I don't necessarily want to get into the details. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of bottom line this for you all, our listeners. So in the end, Silvermane does get his hands on the tablet of time. He's able to use it successfully to make himself younger. But Brian, like all horror movies, there is a major curse. This is like a monkey's paw scenario, because he does make himself younger, but he totally Benjamin Buttons it and reverts back to not only being young, but reverts back to being a baby and perhaps even to an egg, maybe? Does he just completely evaporate and go back to being a little sperm? I don't know, but basically Silvermane is not going to be a factor in the show for the very near future. And I guess Elisa's a mom now, maybe? Question mark, perhaps? It's really interesting to me.
They do come back. I think they do come back because I definitely recall something coming up soon where like there's a joke where Elisa's got to change his diaper, and that I swear to God I've seen that. I think that might happen with the Tomb stuff coming up too, because spoiler, the tablet of time gets free because why? I don't know. Kingpin sold it to Adrian Toombs or something like that, I don't know. Or no, Tombstone sold it to Adrian Toombs. So there's more tablet time stuff coming up in the last 2 episodes. The tablet is still out there and it's still causing chaos. And I don't know why they didn't just destroy it at the end, but even Kingpin was like, get that thing away from me. And he should have just destroyed it right there. Also wanted to mention the giant robot again. It was like the evolved form of the Spider Slayers, with Smythe actually being like the visual control of the giant robot. Did you notice that? I thought he was in the robot, but it's actually an LED screen. Did you notice that?
I couldn't tell if he was in the robot or he wasn't in the robot, and it felt like there may have been continuity errors, but I think you may be right that there was some of those shenanigans going on. But yeah, it was a little bit confusing.
I was like, wow, like that's kind of futuristic because that's literally an LED screen in 1994 or 95, and it looked good because it made you think he was in the suit, but he's not. So that could be something used in the future, I think, where you think a guy's in the suit and you see the face, but it's actually just a projection. I think they can do something with that in a future Marvel movie.
Yes, so we get Silvermane as a baby, but then Hammerhead does something useful. He gets the tablet of time, and he sells the tablet to Adrian Toombs, who we talked about recently, but this is a different version of Adrian Toombs. It is not Michael Keaton. It is a much older version. And this is how we are going to kind of be finishing the season off Yeah, so that is kind of where we end this episode. Like I said, the Tablet of Time stuff I think is very much a mixed bag, but I do like that we keep coming back to this idea of horror and the curse. Like Morbius is cursed, will never be able to be with Felicia. Silvermane wants to be young again, but like there's a Twilight Zone aspect to it as well. But I really love the horror elements. I really, really do appreciate that they've gone there multiple times this season and in the entire run of the show.
The only thing I would have done is like actually find the real temple. That's the only thing I think I would have appreciated more. But because of the logistics, and they were just kind of like, well, we're on a budget. Let's just recreate the fucking tomb at the top of the building. So I thought that was kind of hilarious at the same time. Like, well, that's budget saving, but because I mean, it's not like they couldn't go to the actual temple. They in the beginning of the episode, they showed the two randos fucking finding it in the temple. So it's like, we'll just go to the temple, make it more authentic. But I guess they just didn't want to do that. But it's fine. It was fun for what it was, and you got that Indiana Jones type feel to it, and it's a good contrast to the dark horror that we were getting. So I like how they kind of like ranging the genres all over the place. We got some of that Harryhausen stuff with the giant creature beforehand, so we got sci-fi there, and body horror. So they're really mixing it up, and they're kind of building to this climax with all these different genres.
What if there is a temple, Brian, but it's hidden?
Oh, I see what you're saying. And then you would need the purple parakeets, the blue barracudas, the gray monkeys to join you.
Maybe get some random kids involved as well.
Have the helmets.
Was Golmek the name of the?
I think it was Olmec.
Olmec. Okay, so keeping up with the 90s theme at least. So that is our discussion of episodes 10 through 12. We will be back next week, Brian, with another episode of Hero Pantheon, where we will be discussing the last two episodes of season 2. It's I know we've said talking about 3 episodes, but this is kind of a wonky season because there are 14 instead of 13. So we decided we would give the last 2 episodes their own, as opposed to doing one episode where we discuss 5 at a time. And plus, it seemed like a logical break because we are going to be transitioning into the final plotline of the season and resolve the neogenic nightmare. So for Brian, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again next week.
Robots. I hate robots.